Great. To you, Martin.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. As Fatiha said, I'm Martin, working at Bertelsmann Investment. I try to kind of sum up what we do as shortly and concise as possible. So basically, we are part, obviously, of Bertelsmann Group, which is a globally active media services and education company. And I work for the investment arm of Bertelsmann, which consists of 4 VC funds that kind of invest globally in innovation all around the world. And of course, yeah, I said like content service education. So apparently the topic Web3 blockchain is kind of gaining traction, becoming more and more important. And yeah, Fatiha reached out. She was interested in hearing kind of my perspective on how this technology impacts basically every part of society. And maybe before we start with the discussion, I'd just like to kind of level the playing field a bit and kind of give some let's say introductory information so that you know which perspective I'm kind of taking on this entire topic. So there is a few things that we kind of need to discuss in terms of expectation management. So when I speak about this topic, I like to emphasize that blockchain, crypto, tokens, Web3, all these terms that are kind of used synonymously are actually, and most of you will know that, not the same thing, even though they kind of are part of the same ecosystem. But it's important to make that clear, because when we see things in the crypto market, like what happened last week with the USD and Terra Luna blockchain, people tend kind of to immediately doubt the entire innovation coming out of that ecosystem. And that is actually a huge mistake. Then the second thing I would like to kind of state at the very beginning, because people will often confuse that, I'm not taking the perspective that blockchain is a holy grail and kind of is solving every single problem we have in business, society, or politics. It's a very, very relevant and growing innovation, and it is still very early in the process. And I believe that it has a huge transformative potential on business particularly, but also on other fields, as we will certainly discuss today. And then another point is about the size the market is currently having and the general perspective that people are taking specifically with regards to the hype around NFTs. And just because I believe that there is huge potential to the technology, also huge potential to the application of NFTs, that does not mean that there is no hype in the market. There is a lot of hype in the market at the moment. I think that is a good thing, because only with a certain level of attraction can come a certain level of traction at the end of the day, because people need to kind of get into the space first. And we see when you look at which people are kind of entering to the blockchain space, and you at Code Control probably know that as well. If you look at the talent that is kind of attracted to this field, they come from investment banks, kind of switching into crypto, into Web3, into blockchain. They come from huge strategy consulting firms, because they see a big potential in this market. So we kind of are witnessing a certain type of paradigm shift. And with that, that's the fourth point I'd like to make. I think we can see, despite the market being down substantially, that the market, in fact, is not dead at all. All the fundamentals are there with at least the major projects. We see a lot of new projects kind of entering the market, and I believe that we are just at the very beginning of a huge digital disruption. And when we witness such a disruption unfolding, then we kind of need to also be very wary about the fact that it's completely normal that mistakes happen and that things kind of break. And even though last week was basically the housing bubble, Lehman Brothers moment for the entire industry, at least in the most recent past, it doesn't mean that it's the end of the industry at all. I mean, this is also a learning that we all need to kind of draw. Maybe we have some people in this call, and maybe some of those who kind of will listen to the recording, that had major positions in the Terra Luna ecosystem, or maybe were using the UST coin, and were also attracted by the offering of an 18, 19, 20% yield on a stable coin, which itself is just a crazy promise, right? Yeah. So there is a lot of hype in the market. There is a lot of greed in the market, but at the same time, this is necessary to have this innovation. You all kind of know this Gartner hype cycle where you have like this tremendous peak and then everything goes down, and then you have this kind of steady growth after the bubble is kind of bursting. But what people tend to forget all the time is that when such a bubble bursts, it doesn't mean that everything goes down. It just means that all the crappy projects are kind of wiped out of the market. And this, I think, is the fifth point and is actually quite a good thing. So these are kind of the first introductory words, so that you know from which perspective I'm kind of coming, because you will hear me speaking very passionate about this topic and very enthusiastically. And I am in fact very passionate and enthusiastic about this topic, but I still think it's very important that we kind of have a realistic expectation to what we're talking about.
Yeah, for sure. What do you think about people who use like last week market meltdown as a way to attack the cryptocurrency or like the blockchain technology by saying, cryptocurrency doesn't have any underlying, fundamental, like the real fundamental asset. That's why it's easy to burst like that.
That's a good question. I mean, there's always when there's something like happening like this, there's always like two parties involved. There's the creators of an ecosystem, and then there's the people that buy into it, right? And the third party is those who probably decide to attack the ecosystem. And what they all have in common is that they are acting out of the same motivation, which is greed.
Yeah.
So when you build up an ecosystem like that and you promise a 20% yield, by applying an algorithmic stablecoin that is backed with, I think it was different at the end. At the end, it was also Avalanche and other cryptocurrencies, not only Terra and Luna and Bitcoin, but also others. But if you promise such kind of a yield in such a volatile market environment, and you kind of give all the responsibility to an algorithm without any security nets, then as a creator of the blockchain, you're kind of providing the necessary infrastructure for people to even at all consider attacking you. Like, this is the first thing.
Yeah.
Then you have people that believe that you can become rich very, very quickly by investing in crypto. And certainly there is some truth to this. I mean, if you kind of bought into Bitcoin early on, or other Ethereum, even Cardano or Sol when they were early in the process, or Sheep, you can think about the project whatever you want, but there was like a certain market environment. But what people don't understand is, like, when you really speak about returns of 100x, 10x, even 20% yield,
yeah,
like, there is no situation in the world where such a return comes without any risk.
Yeah, of course. It is very highly volatile market.
It's a highly, exactly. It's a highly volatile market. And of course, this technology in its roots has some enemies.
Yeah.
Right. So there will always be people that kind of try to attack the ecosystem. And this is, I think, why I'm not necessarily sad about what happened last week, because I think in the long run, it will help the entire ecosystem mature and kind of build a value or expand its value proposition. The value proposition of blockchain technology is not cryptocurrencies making you rich. And maybe when we're speaking about that, it's important to understand maybe a brief history of cryptocurrencies, and also again kind of defining what that actually means, because I think that the terminology is flawful. It's also counterproductive, and in fact it's why in the mainstream business environment, even in politics, even in regulations, it has such a bad image. So now the initial idea, or the first, let's say, fully decentralized blockchain that everybody knows about is Bitcoin, right? So the Bitcoin has a very clear mandate, and now we're kind of opening a political perspective on that topic. So what the creators of blockchain got right, from my personal perspective, is that our monetary system for more than 50 years has been facing tremendous problems. And the problem is that with the end of the Bretton Woods financial system, there was no backing to the US dollar currency anymore, when they kind of withdrew from the gold standard. right? And they needed to do that to expand their the US dollar amount in the markets back in the days to finance the war in Vietnam mainly, right? So what they did is they kind of introduced flexible exchanges, right? So flexible exchange rates. There was no backing of any kind that allowed other countries to kind of withdraw gold for a fixed amount of US dollar. And what that brings is inflation in the long run, as we are seeing it now. So everything that is happening now is not necessarily a surprise, right? So what happened after that was that they kind of not directly pegged, but in a way connected the US dollar to oil exports, right? So they went to the oil exporting countries and made deals with them to make sure that they only sell their oil, which is obviously the most traded commodity on the planet, in US dollar and reinvest this money in US American yields and bonds, bonds, etc. Right? So this is how they kind of, how the US dollar system kind of made sure that there is an intrinsic value to the currency itself.
Yeah.
Now, what Bitcoin did was they basically, the blockchain said, okay, we will have a system that is fully decentralized, that brings this concept of value back to money or to a payment method. And that can only happen when you introduce, again, a concept of scarcity. And that can also only be fair if you decentralize the way the decisions in such an ecosystem are made. So you do not have a central bank that can basically centrally decide to increase monetary supply or reduce it. For certain political purposes, there needs to be a decentralization to this. Now, I'm not saying that I'm fully fond of this idea, but I get where they are kind of coming from. Mm-hmm. Now, to build the bridge to what we were discussing very briefly, blockchain technology and crypto started as a currency, right? But everything that happened afterwards is not a currency. ETH is an ecosystem on which projects are built. It's more like a share, frankly speaking, right? That you buy a share in an ecosystem. The same is true for all the other ecosystems. It's not a currency in the sense that it's a method for payment, because these things kind of increase in value or devalue depending on the traction that is on the ecosystem, depending on the usage that is on the ecosystem, and also depending on the money that flows into this ecosystem. So when we speak about cryptocurrency, I think we are kind of mixing Bitcoin and all the others, and that I think is a fundamental mistake.
Actually, someone previously already said in the comment section of the post, he basically saying that blockchain's probably not dead, but maybe we should shift the focus from cryptocurrency, because there are more things that we can do with the for example, with the proof of work, and like just basing just like using it just for the sake of money and greed, and centering the technology based on that. It's well, he argues that it's such a waste of technology because there are so much more that we can do about it. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's intertwined, right? Like, I don't think that we do not need cryptocurrency or these kind of tokens or these payment methods in the ecosystem, because they are a substantial kind of functioning element of a blockchain, right? And it's good that they increase in value. And I also think that it's good to have a kind of decentralized alternative for reasons that we will discuss. But I totally agree that we need to shift our focus on building value. Like, you cannot kind of blow up such an ecosystem and hope that this is a somewhat sustainable growth. This is not how things happen, right? I mean, that works for a while, and then everything implodes. Those who will succeed at the end of the day will be the players in the market, and these tokens will have tremendous value. I'm very certain about that. Those that kind of really generate true value, an output that somebody can use, or that helps someone, that helps the people, that helps the businesses, that provides an added value to humanity. Like, this is, at the end of the day, this is also true for business.
Yeah.
Like, there's no big difference to that. The thing is that blockchain only, and this is, I highly recommend everyone to watch videos from Jamil Sheikh, who kind of, he runs the biggest blockchain community in New York City. He's a very, very smart and intelligent person who takes many different perspectives. And what he basically said also when he had a presentation last week at a BI event that we organized, he said that we need to kind of understand that blockchain only solves one problem. Like it solves the double spend problem in the digital world, and it does that without the need of an intermediary. That is the only. This is literally the only problem the blockchain solves.
Yeah,
But
because everything is so out in the open, so people don't need that middleman to do their businesses, whatever their businesses are.
yeah, I mean, it's funny because like there is innovations that I wrote an article about that will be published, I think today or tomorrow. There's innovations that are very obvious, right? Like for instance, antibiotics, right? You know, like when you hear about what they do, you immediately say, okay, this is mind-blowing. Like this probably increases the age that people will achieve in their life by 10 to 15%. Okay, this is obviously a huge innovation. The wheel was a huge innovation. Now, blockchain technology is one of these very quiet innovations because it only solves one problem. But if you see what that means, it's a tremendous disruptive impact because it gives, for the first time in history, you have kind of the opportunity to give a digital thing a value. You didn't have that before. When I send a PDF to you, I have the PDF and you have it. So the likelihood of the PDF reaching a value above 0 is 0.
Yeah.
But now with NFTs, for instance, you can actually do that. You can remove intermediaries. You can remove the component of trust from transactions, from business. And if you now look what that means, like where do you have intermediaries, like notaries, remittance market? Like 40% of a transaction that you send from, let's say, the Philippines to Germany, you need to pay to an intermediary to kind of verify the transaction. 13% of the GDP of the Philippines is remittance. 9% of the GDP of Senegal is remittance. So if you speak in monetary terms, this impact, even though it only solves one problem, is just gigantic. And I think this is what the projects and the people should kind of focus on.
How confident are you that we will eventually adopt this to a general scale? Because right now it's more, there's like a resistance of adopting new technology as we usually have, but especially after the meltdown that we have it all the time. So like I feel like to the general public, to people who's not involved in the blockchain industry, what they hear is that, oh, Bitcoin down 25% again, 50% again, another token crash. So like how confident are you that this blockchain technology and its adaptation will be massively adopted?
I'm 100% sure about this. There's literally no alternative. Because I mean, it's the value proposition that the technology provides. And just look at the dynamics, like when there was like the first blockchain wave, and there was actually, before I really dived into this topic, but the first blockchain wave was basically a few years ago, like 2000, I don't know, 17, 18 or so, when this whole thing was hyped up with kind of Bitcoin reaching 40K the first time. Everybody was talking about this. The issue was in that time, and this is how I perceived it, I might be entirely wrong, but like at that time, it felt like everybody was searching for problems that kind of fit the solution blockchain is providing. Like people didn't really grasp what it does. And now that changes.
Yeah.
Now you have obvious problems, and the technology, specifically because smart contracts have matured in the meantime and are actually capable to have an application layer on the blockchain. This is when like the true innovation kind of started kicking in. And again, I think people are pretty much, how would you say it, like this in many parts of life, in business, in politics, in even on social media and society, people are strongly disconnecting in a certain way, right? And there's so much value lost because it's given to intermediaries that kind of do things that are not necessary applying blockchain technology anymore. Like I just mentioned the remittance market as a, let's say, DeFi example. Let's speak about the content industry. I mean, will it entirely kind of delete or erase any intermediary from how content is produced or consumed? Obviously not. This is not going to happen. But will it drastically reduce that? For sure. Now, if a technology reduces intermediaries, let's say you have 10 intermediaries in the process of kind of producing a music album to kind of bringing it to the listener. That basically means that from the creator to the consumer of the content, you need to pay in 8 different instances, like money flows from A to B. Now, if you reduce just 5 of these and you assume that everybody kind of spends the same amount of money for an intermediary service, if you just reduce 5 of these, you have kind of doubled. You haven't changed the total amount of revenue, but you have doubled the revenue available for everyone in the process. And at the end of the day, if you look at how much money a musician makes at Spotify, I think it's around 0.0008 cents per click, which is literally nothing, right? So I mean, how many times do you need to have your music played to actually make money, right? Yep. Now, if you reduce the intermediaries in the process, this will at the end of the day be beneficial to the content creators. So it will be democratizing how content is kind of consumed, and B, it might end up being either cheaper or more connected for those who actually consume the content.
Would it be easier though for people, because the role, like one of the roles of these intermediaries is to make life easier for point A to point B. So if we do it by ourselves and with the adaptation of blockchain, would it actually be easier? Would people go for it? Because I think that's the biggest consideration, that people don't want to learn. Yeah. Because that takes so much time and effort to actually to learn and do it themselves than if they pay someone else, or if if their portion gets taken away by someone else.
No, you're absolutely right. And that is why I say it's never gonna delete the intermediaries. It's gonna maybe reduce the number of intermediaries. It certainly will do that. Yep. But most importantly, the role of the intermediary will change. So now, if you let's stick with the music industry. Yep. Like when you're a, let's say, indie artist, and you want to record a music album. You don't have, maybe you still go to school, you don't have much money. So what do? You kind of try to have as many concerts as possible to kind of get some money in the very first place, right? Maybe you do fundraising, but even when you do like fundraising or crowdfunding or whatever, like on an online tool, there is somebody you need to trust. So there is like a provider that says, all right, I will make sure that you kind of get the money that you're raising. And what can you offer in exchange? Not a lot, because you don't have any kind of, let's say, intellectual property that you can share. Now, for such an artist, it could be a very attractive tool just to say, okay, I tokenize, let's say, the rights on my new album, and with a smart contract, I connect kind of the revenue streams to the clicks and amounts that anyone is kind of watching or listening to my music. And you define how much money you're going to take for that and how high the share you're going to give up for it. But you have an entirely new way of making money. Now, having said that, that might be helpful for this type of artist. For other artists, it's entirely different. Like if you speak about, I don't know, think of anyone, Eminem, what is it for him? Now, the role of the label usually is it's the rights management. Okay, I get that. That's a huge thing. That's also something that will be disrupted, likely in a sense, but it will never be kind of entirely taken away. But it will be disruptive. It will be leaner. It will be more transparent, which actually in the music industry is the biggest issue. But for such a huge artist, it's okay. I have a huge community. I can just do an NFT drop and make shitloads of money with it without having to pay any share to my label or any other type of intermediary, right? So the use cases differ from the different point in a process that you're in, but they are there. And I think what will become much more important is the concept of provenance, like kind of having this combination of creator, story, and community being more connected. And you will need intermediaries that facilitate this type of experiences.
Of course.
Right. And this is why
Yes, I have a question about this. So what I find very interesting, and I definitely agree with what you're saying, is that ultimately the largest role is going to go to platforms that are going to be facilitating this. So do you agree with that, like that vision as well? Because to me, that is one of the largest hurdles I see right now is people that are not interested in blockchain, etc., and the collaboration on it, because there's a huge responsibility that we also, or certain people are happy to give away to an intermediary because they don't need to remember, their seed phrase, and they can lose everything with this. Just to say that. So to what extent do you think that these platforms are going to become centralized units? Because in that sense, it would only be moving the responsibility to another technology in a very doomed scenario, let's say. And then the other question I had around this is, do you think those platforms in your vision will be new players, or do you think it will rather be existing players that are going to change the way that they are doing their current businesses?
These are two very good questions, and the first one was actually a very good observation, but I would disagree with the first part of it. I think what the major overarching trend that we're seeing is that we're actually, in a sense, moving away from a platform economy. Because what the platform internet is usually described as is like Web 2.0, right? We have these platforms that kind of provide the opportunity to exchange information. That is all that happens on these kind of platforms. It's huge. I'm not saying that it's not a tremendous revolution. It's a huge thing, but Web3 is different in a sense that it provides the opportunity to kind of interact in a internet of value. So this shift is from kind of consuming information without having, let's say, a concept of scarcity in a digital world, to kind of introducing this concept of scarcity in a digital world in a, let's say, decentralized Web3 ownership economy, right? Because the tool that, or the product that you're consuming does not change. It's music, it's movies, it's art. And of course you will need platforms that kind of provide the opportunity to actually access these things. That never changes. But what will kind of change is that you can now own much more than a MP3 file, or much more than kind of a subscription to Spotify. You will be able to really own a share of something scarce. And I get that it's a very like abstract concept that for many people sounds a bit stupid in a sense. Like, why would I be interested in owning something digital? You can kind of make up the same, and again, I'm kind of referring to Jamil Sheikh. you can just think about that also in the physical world. Now, why would anyone pay millions of dollars for the Mona Lisa? And then the next question would be, like, if you would have an identical Mona Lisa, 100% identical, would you pay the same price as for the original that kind of Leonardo da Vinci touched and painted himself? There's no way in hell that anyone would do that, right? And that is the concept of provenance that is now kind of introduced. You know when a digital file was created, you know who created it, like you have all this information kind of immutably stored in there. And
so it's almost facilitators rather than platforms.
Yeah. Right, it's more like facilitators. And I mean, we have some examples. I think Audius is one, right? Probably you've heard of that kind of music blockchain. They are very early stage. They are still very small. And this is kind of playing into your second question, who will be kind of defining where we are going from here? Is it the kind of the current big players, or is it others? I think it depends. This is what disruption always provides. Like Netflix was capable back in the days to kind of disrupt their own business model, moving away from lending videos to kind of being one of the first ones to have this subscription-based business model, right? So they disrupted themselves and they were tremendously successful. But how many players usually are capable of doing that? I mean, let's look at electromobility, for instance. Like the firepower for Volkswagen, Daimler, all the big car brands, has been on the table. Like they have the money, they have the resources, they have the labor force to disrupt themselves and to be a market leader. But at the end of the day, it seems to be Tesla, and we don't know yet if they're going to sustain that. It very much looks like that. Like it's very difficult to say. I think the big players are kind of in a very similar situation to the early internet now, right? Like back in the days, you would say, well, why do we need email? People would actually say that, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of backlash when during the early internet time, they would say, yeah, this will not take off, no one will use it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I
Exactly.
think there's a large correlation.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look back on old videos, it's hilarious, of course, you know.
Absolutely. And now, I mean, so for us as a company, that's only my personal opinion. I think what we need to do is, and that requires like responsible leaders, because it's very difficult to manage innovation as I kind of perceive it, right? So you can't just jump on every trend, but at the same time, when something is unfolding that has the potential to kind of be tremendously impactful on how you do business, then you need to be capable of reacting. And I think some of the big players have the opportunity to do that. I think Bertelsmann, that's my personal view, is in a good position to do that, for instance, because we are very attractive for the ecosystem in a sense, just considering the tremendous amount of content we have. So Penguin Random House is basically the biggest publishing house in the world. We have a music label, we have all the content that is within RTL Group. Obviously that's attractive because people are looking for use cases, right? Those that can provide the technology are actually looking for the communities, and we have the communities. Take all the authors, for instance, right? So there is huge synergy. And now the question is, how do we leverage that? But at the same time, there will be new players emerging that are just quicker and more pragmatic, and they have the opportunity to become huge. Now you see that with these exchanges like Coinbase, Binance. Yeah. Why is it not eToro? Like, why is not eToro the biggest crypto exchange?
Yeah, they've been in the market for a while now.
Yeah, exactly. So, and it's like, as I said, innovation is always driven by like or usually driven by kind of the small players. It's very, very rarely that you have a Steve Jobs that kind of brings up the iPhone out of nowhere and kind of changes everything. But yeah, we are reshuffling the cards, and we will see what kind of benefits from that. But a very good question. If I had the answer, I would probably call you from a yacht now.
No, but it's good to have your vision on it. It's interesting.
Rafi, do you want to?
Yeah. Martin, I was like, I heard your conversation on this, and regarding the lack of intermediaries that's not needed right now, like with the blockchain and everything. So what do you think about the shared economy? Like basically, when we talk about the art and everything, and whoever is interested in the art or the kind of the segment. So how it's going to change the way the community interacts with the ecosystem, like basically with art and like how they're going to benefit. Like basically when you talk about the artists, they're getting benefited because they don't have the intermediaries involved. So how the community would benefit out of it? Like if there are no intermediaries, or will blockchain help in establishing a shared economy, like where even fans are getting benefited for following the artist and following the creators.
I'm not sure I got the question because the audio was a bit poor.
I think he was basically asking about how blockchain can interact with shared economy, especially when it's for the artists, the community gets a benefit, but like what's more than just what the artist is sharing.
Yeah, that's also a very good question. I mean, so now what is when we go back to the initial assumption that kind of blockchain only solved this one problem, like without this double spend problem, without the need of the intermediary, then that we need to kind of discuss what the double spend problem is. And the double spend problem is a purely digital problem, right? So I think the tremendous added value that comes from this technology is the concept of scarcity introduced to internet files, basically, right? To a PDF, to an MP3, to a video. And with that comes the concept of provenance. Now, if you go to, and this is an NFT question that you were kind of asking, Ravi. If you look at, for instance, the Bored Ape Yacht Club, right? I know it has also a very bad image, and I understand why, because it's crazy ape pictures and nobody really gets the actual value of that. But it's actually not that stupid, because it opens, like it does exactly what I just described. It kind of combines creator, the story, and the community. So it provides you a unique access to something in an immutable manner, right? And this is, I think, what is very important. So it's not about taking away the intermediary. That is not kind of the thing that makes the interaction more personal, more emotional, more individual. It's actually the fact that you have the opportunity to introduce the concept of scarcity, and you feel special because you own something, right? And this is, I think, what makes this entire thing so different. I mean, what is a book, right? What do you own when you buy a book? Like, you just own a combination of paper and ink, right? And basically, you could even argue that everything that happens from the moment you open the book is triggered by the book, but you build the world in your mind. It's not somebody else building it for you. You're reading it, you're consuming it, you're not owning it. You're not owning the intellectual property, you're not owning a unique share of the experience. And this is, again, it's a very abstract concept, but what an NFT kind of does is they say, first of all, the author is rewarded because you have the provenance, you know when was it created, who created it. So once he sells something, it has an actual value, and with every secondary, tertiary sale, etc., this author is rewarded, right? So this is one big difference automatically. This is what makes this concept of ape pictures so interesting, because they don't make money once, they make money in every step of the way, right? So this is really democratizing content. It's not the intermediary that scans for good pictures or for good videos or content and then sells it for a lot of money while the creator is kind of left with $50. This is like one tremendous difference. And then the other difference is that you feel like you're really part of something. And you have that already. Like when you listen to your favorite music and you're very passionate about that, it's immutable. It gives you a certain sense of experience, of belonging, right? You could listen to the same song by a cover band, you would not feel the same thing. If it's exactly the voice and the sound of the music, look at the community Nirvana has, like to date, like it hasn't changed, like it's huge. Would they listen to a cover band the same way they listen to the original? No. Now imagine they can actually own a share of that community, like really be part of it, owning maybe part of an intellectual property or access to special meetings, and they do not need to trust a label, right? They just directly interact via smart contracts, of course, or any other kind of tech tool with the artists. I think that is difficult to grasp, and I'm probably not the type of person that would kind of, I don't know, like fall for this. Society is changing and demand is changing.
Yeah,
does that answer your question?
The idea. Go on.
Does that just ask if that kind of answered the question?
Yeah, almost. It has touched, but actually, I was more concerned, like as a consumer. So how we are getting like let me just connect the.
Yeah.
Now it would be better, I think. Hello.
It is.
Yeah.
Okay. Sure. So I was saying that that's like you did touch upon it, but my concern was that as a consumer, as a community. So if we are trying to build that, we are trying to help the intermediaries like go away, or maybe due to that. My point was that what the community is getting in return for that, like if we are not depending too much on the intermediary, so the creators are getting benefited, but how about the community, those who are consuming the art or consuming the music or whatever it is, and minus the intermediary? So how they are going to be benefited and through blockchain technology, so that they end up within the ecosystem and they try to.
I get it. I mean, there's plenty of ways. I don't know which of these ways will be applied for which target group, of course, but one way is, for example, at the moment, the ones that own all the IP on a song or on a creative production is either the artist or the label, or both to different shares, but usually it's the label, right? So you don't have any chance to kind of directly own a share on, I don't know, a Foo Fighters album or a Ariana Grande album or whatever. Like, this is never gonna happen. Now, if you tokenize that asset on a public layer, theoretically, you could kind of provide access to everyone who wants to be involved to hold that asset, because it has a value, because it's kind of unique. Like in that case, that doesn't need to be an NFT. It would rather be an ERC20 token or something like that. You have like 10 million tokens and you can trade it. So this would be one option where you can say, okay, I'm not only kind of listening and consuming the music, but I can actually, because it's an internet of value, I can hold part of this value, right? I can be involved in that ecosystem in a different way, and you make this asset, because you make it valuable by definition, you make it tradable. And I think what we need to also, I probably should have emphasized that, we are speaking about the concept of the metaverse a lot, right? We shouldn't forget that. Like, maybe for us now doesn't really make sense, but a metaverse was not possible before we had the blockchain. Virtual reality is possible, but when you say you're really kind of merging into a new kind of reality, then you need to have this concept of scarcity. You need to have like this concept of owning a digital asset. You might have the same glasses in the metaverse for your avatar, but it wouldn't be worth anything if it's not individual, or at least limited and scarce, right? This is, I think, what is kind of going to be one of the huge catalyzers for the technology. But I agree with also, and like the question very much, because this is what we're kind of trying to discuss. So what is the future potential and what is the current potential, right? And where are we in this progress? We are still, that's what I mean, we are still early, but we're getting there. And it's important that people ask the questions that Sun and you are asking. And yeah, I'm also one of those people who always kind of ask these exact questions, because we need to find answers for that when we want to kind of change the way things are going at the moment.
I think if I can add to that, the concept of owning something in the blockchain is not really something that we understand yet, because it's like the concept is new, and as much, and also like the concept of decentralization and why a unique experience, like for being like a Bored Ape Club, for example, it's something that is really a new concept to us, because in real life we can be part of a club and it's normal. And yeah. but this is just a digital, but we need that, because like in the future, I think I personally think that in the future, because of this decentralization, we will not attach our identity to the place where we're born in, or even where we live in. We attach our identity online, and because of that, we basically don't have identity. So this is like I feel like the development of blockchain also will promote the development of decentralized identity. Absolutely. Where we're just digital being, not just a material being anymore.
And that's frightening. Like, frankly speaking, that's also like we're speaking about that in a very idealistic way. And I'm also like kind of emphasizing all these things and how great it is to have the opportunity to do that from a technical perspective, but it's also very frightening when we think about that. So, and this is like, I think when we spoke last week, when I said to you, like, I think also one thing we need to discuss is maybe briefly how that kind of impacts society and politics, what the problems are, because at the end of the day, every huge invention has tremendous potential to change humanity for the better, but there's always also a downside risk to kind of be very, very counterproductive. So and I mean, to name a few examples, maybe antibiotics is not the right one, but let's speak about nuclear energy. Like, it theoretically provides the opportunity to deliver a somewhat green type of energy, extremely efficient, right? More efficient than anything we know. But at the same time, the exact same technology has the potential to erase the entire planet within the blink of an eye, right? So these are like, it's about, this is why I mean, it's also about like having responsible leaders. I'm personally very skeptic about the approach that Facebook is taking with Meta. I don't like it because it's not decentralized. In fact, it is centralized, and it's not going to offer the same benefits to the people that a fully decentralized experience would. But at the same time, I'm very positive that there will be many people that will have better alternatives. And at the end of the day, the best product is kind of the one that is winning.
Yeah. Well, that has been a great discussion. Maybe we can add one last comment before ending.
Yeah, one last thing I'd like to say. Also think about, and I don't know what you all kind of do from a professional perspective, but there's so many fields of application. I'd like to kind of just think about the impact that also has on society. Like, just let's think about social media that is so kind of polarizing the way we are interacting. There's just so much hostility on each side of the spectrum. And that is also a topic where blockchain can actually kick in. Like, you have so many fake profiles, fake accounts running around and just automatically posting stuff, trying to shift opinions and trying to also either represent political agendas or the agendas of some individual rich people or whatever. Like, this is a huge problem that we're having. And this is, again, also a problem that blockchain can solve. And then also I'd like you to think about the very traditional concept of democracy, and just think about the fact that we're discussing about so many elections worldwide. If we can actually trust the result, we wouldn't need to have such a discussion anymore if you would put an election or a poll or whatever on a blockchain and make sure that everybody can access it, giving their votes. I know there are hurdles to this. You need to be finding ways to implement that, to get all the elderly people to kind of voting in this digital way. It's a process going forward. So there's huge potential impact to also transform the way society functions. And at the same time, there's huge risk for authoritarian regimes, maybe for movements and people who try to kind of erase any type of anonymity that can also be facilitated with this technology. So it's at the end of the day, it's very much about responsibility and accountability, which is, I think, why the title makes so much sense.
It is. There's a lot of things that we should prepare for the future. But yeah, any other last comment from Rafi, Sana?
Anyone, also feel free to reach out anytime, right? Like, I think you have my address. Otherwise, you can just shoot me a mail on LinkedIn or something.
I just wanted to say I really enjoyed the conversation. I think the risks you mentioned are definitely there, and also in terms of scarcity. I like thinking about these things that can be hurdles, you know, because now we were talking about the Bored Apes and the prices are ridiculous. So if you're going to look at scarcity, it's also market effect. So you're going to look at huge prices. So I find it very interesting to have these conversations to kind of look at the downside of the technology that we see today and how should we approach that in order to make it actually something that is going to be beneficial in the way that's being envisioned. So really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you also for the interaction. I like that a lot.
All right, then that should be it, because I promised it will be 1 hour and we just right on time. Well, thank you so much for your participation here today. I will have another one on June 3rd. It will be about metaverse, by the way. So it will be about blockchain, metaverse, and digital city, because the person who will lead the discussion, he is currently working on creating a digital city. He's actually making a digital city, like a Berlin digital city. So using Unreal Engine. So if you're interested in that, you will see it again, June 3rd, 12 p.m., but you will see it from my LinkedIn or Code Control LinkedIn, or I will also send it to your email because I have everything. Just kidding. I will use your data wisely because that's what we're trying to do here in the Web 3.0. So yeah, have a good day. Thank you so much for such a wonderful discussion. I hope I can see you around. Thank you, Martin, for a wonderful insight. And yeah, for your participation.
No, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you for having me.
All right. Take care.